A few days ago, the United States Army did something it had not done in 58 years. It approved a new lethal hand grenade. The announcement landed on March 10, 2026. The new weapon is called the M111 Offensive Hand Grenade, built from scratch for the kind of room-by-room, building-by-building urban combat that has defined every major American ground operation since the Cold War ended. The Army was careful to say the same thing in every press release. The M67 Fragmentation Grenade is not going anywhere. It is not being retired. It is not being replaced. After 58 years of continuous service, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, the baseball-shaped steel grenade every American soldier has carried since 1968 is still the primary hand grenade of the United States military. The M111 exists alongside it, not instead of it. That announcement is what made me want to tell you the real story of the M67. Not the part you already know, the part that explains why, after nearly 6 decades and every modern war on the books, the Army's answer to a new threat wasn't to replace the old grenade. It was to add a second one. To understand what the M67 solved, you have to understand what American soldiers were carrying before it. Go back to World War I. The standard U.S. grenade was the Mark II, the Pineapple. Heavy, angular, cast iron, with those distinctive segmented ridges that every soldier assumed were designed to help it fragment. They were, that was the intention. The grooves were meant to control how the cast iron broke apart on detonation. In practice, they didn't work as designed. The fragmentation pattern was irregular and unpredictable. The Mark II scattered metal in uneven bursts that varied grenade to grenade, which meant the kill radius was inconsistent and the injury radius was difficult to predict. The Army knew this throughout World War II. It knew it in Korea. The problem was that fixing it required starting over, and the Mark II was already entrenched in training, logistics, and production. By the early 1950s, the pressure finally produced a replacement. The M26 entered service around 1952, a lemon-shaped grenade with a smooth steel body housing a notched internal fragmentation coil. That coil was the key improvement. Instead of the body itself shattering unpredictably, the M26 used a pre-notched liner inside the casing to control how fragmentation occurred, producing far more even and predictable fragment distribution than the Mark II ever managed. The kill radius was tighter, the injury radius more consistent, and the whole thing weighed 14 ounces. Manageable for a soldier to throw in combat. The M26 went to Vietnam. It was the primary U.S. hand grenade through the early years of the war. But soldiers in the field were finding a new problem. In the thick vegetation of the jungle, the grenade's safety pin could snag on branches, vines, and equipment as it was carried. There were accidents, some fatal. The Army added a safety clip, a secondary retention device on the lever, and redesignated the improved version. The line of development kept moving. M26, M26A1, M61, M33. Each iteration refined something. The M33 reduced weight and moved to a spherical steel body with more uniform fragmentation. In 1968, the final refinement came off the line. It added a safety clip to the M33's lever, one more layer of protection against accidental arming. The Army called it the M67. It weighed 14 ounces, spherical, roughly the size and shape of a baseball. Inside, 6.5 ounces of Composition B explosive, a mixture of RDX and TNT packed around a pre-notched steel fragmentation body. Lethal radius of 5 meters. A casualty producing radius of 15. Fragments capable of traveling 230 meters from the point of detonation. The 4 to 5 second fuse delay was long enough for a soldier to throw the grenade and reach cover. Short enough that an enemy soldier on the receiving end couldn't pick it up and throw it back. What the Army had finally built was a grenade that worked the same way every time, in every hand, in every environment. You couldn't train soldiers to use a grenade that behaved differently depending on terrain, or temperature, or production batch. The M67 behaved the same in a jungle in 1968 as it would in an Iraqi street in 2004, or a mountain pass in Afghanistan in 2011. That predictability, the ability to know exactly what the weapon will do before you pull the pin, is not a small thing when the alternative is dying because you miscalculated. It entered service as American forces were fighting at full intensity in Southeast Asia. It has not left service since. The hand grenade survives because it solves a problem that rifles and machine guns cannot. You cannot shoot around corners. You cannot drop a rifle round into a fortified position from above. You cannot clear a trench with direct fire when the enemy is already below ground level. The grenade is the weapon for the space between your last covered position and the next threat. The blind spot that every other weapon in the infantry kit leaves open. American soldiers in Vietnam used the M67 for exactly those gaps. Bunker clearance, trench fighting, the close, tangled, frightening business of attacking a position in terrain where line of sight was measured in feet. It was used defensively, thrown to break up attacks on a perimeter in the dark, when you could hear movement but not see where it was coming from. It was used offensively, rolled through doorways ahead of the soldier who was about to enter. It was cooked, held for 1 or 2 seconds before release to reduce the time the enemy had to react after it landed. The M67 went through every subsequent American conflict without serious challenge. The Gulf War, Somalia, the opening campaigns in Afghanistan, early Iraq. In open terrain, against exposed personnel, against fortified fighting positions in the open, it remained the most effective man-portable area weapon a soldier could carry. 58 years in service across every climate, every terrain type, every kind of enemy. Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, the Gulf, the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq. It was present at every major American ground engagement of the past 6 decades. No design update, no fundamental redesign. The only engineering change after 1968 was incremental, refinements to the fuse, and minor production improvements that didn't alter the weapon's basic character. That longevity is not an accident. It is not institutional inertia. It is not procurement failure. It is what happens when someone gets the fundamental design right the first time, and the wars that follow keep confirming it. Every weapon has a problem it was built to solve, and every weapon eventually meets a problem it wasn't. For the M67, the answer came in Fallujah in November 2004. Operation Phantom Fury, the largest urban battle American forces had fought since Hue City in 1968, put 12,000 Marines and soldiers into one of the densest street grids in Iraq. The enemy had spent months fortifying the city. Buildings connected by holes punched through shared walls, booby-trapped doors, rooms fortified with sandbags and fighting positions designed to channel any assault into a kill zone. And here the M67's physics, the same physics that made it so effective in open terrain, became a liability. A fragmentation grenade works by driving steel fragments outward at lethal velocity in all directions. In an open field or a jungle clearing, those fragments travel until they hit something biological. In a room, they hit walls. They hit furniture. They hit concrete and deflect at unpredictable angles back toward the soldiers who threw the grenade. The fragments that don't deflect punch through thin interior walls, and anything on the other side of that wall was as likely to be a friendly soldier clearing the adjacent room as it was to be an enemy fighter. Fratricide. That was the word the Army used. Not a theoretical risk. A documented pattern from the house-to-house fighting in Iraq that forced tactical adjustments at every level. Colonel Vince Morris, the Army's project manager for close combat systems, said it plainly in the official announcement 2 days ago. The M67 grenade wasn't always the right tool for the job in door-to-door fighting. The risk of fratricide on the other side of the wall was too high. So soldiers adapted. They used the M67 more selectively. They developed clearing techniques that minimized grenade use in tight spaces. They compensated with other tools, breaching charges, shotguns for close work, The LAW for punching through walls rather than clearing rooms? Working around a limitation is not the same as solving it. The Army had learned something in Iraq and Afghanistan that couldn't be unlearned. For the specific problem of fighting room by room through a city, the grenade that had served since 1968 was the wrong shape of explosion. The answer to that problem took decades to reach full material release. The M111 Offensive Hand Grenade was cleared this week. Developed at Picatinny Arsenal in New Jersey, the same institution that has produced American munitions since 1880, it was built around a different theory of lethality. The M67 Fragments, the M111 Overpressures. Blast overpressure is exactly what it sounds like, a wave of force generated by the detonation that radiates outward from the explosion. In open air, it dissipates quickly and its effects on personnel are limited compared to fragmentation. In an enclosed space, a room, a tunnel, a bunker, that wave has nowhere to go. It bounces off walls, compresses from multiple angles simultaneously, and delivers devastating effects to everyone inside without producing a single fragment that can punch through a wall and kill the soldier waiting in the hallway. The M67's fragmentation behaves differently on each side of a wall. The M111's blast overpressure does not care about walls. The pressure wave travels through the space, not the barrier. For a soldier throwing a grenade into a room he hasn't entered yet, with friendlies clearing the room next door, it is the difference between a tool he can use and one he can't. The M111 also replaces something that had been on the books, technically in inventory but forbidden to use, for decades. The Mark III A2 was an offensive grenade that entered service alongside the M67 in 1968. It was a concussion design, built for exactly the kind of enclosed space fighting the M67 couldn't handle well. By 1975, it had been restricted from use entirely. The reason? Its body contained asbestos. Soldiers couldn't train with it, couldn't issue it, couldn't deploy it. It sat in the inventory as a restricted item. Technically present, functionally gone. Its role unfilled, while the Army continued issuing the M67 for everything. The M111 is the weapon the Mark III A2 was supposed to be, built with 50 years of material science that didn't exist in 1968. Plastic body, fully consumed during detonation. Same 5-step arming process as the M67. Same fuse components, meaning the production lines that build M67 fuses can build M111 fuses without retooling. The Army didn't just build a new grenade. It built one that shares a production line with the old one, because the old one isn't going anywhere. 58 years is a long time to carry the same grenade. The M67 has been in the hands of American soldiers through 9 presidencies, a dozen major conflicts, 3 generations of recruits who trained with it before anyone now serving was born. The design it refined, the fragmentation body, the composition B fill, the 4 to 5 second fuse, traces its lineage back to the M26 that soldiers first carried in Korea, and the lessons drawn from the Mark II's irregular performance in 2 world wars. What the Army announced 2 days ago is not the end of that story. The M111 exists because the M67 works so well in the environments it was designed for that the Army never needed to replace it, only to cover the one scenario where its physics became a problem. Open terrain, M67. Enclosed space, M111. The engineers at Picatinny didn't build a better grenade. They built a second grenade for the fight the first one couldn't finish. That's not a retirement. That's a promotion. This is exactly the kind of story this channel exists to tell. If you want to know why weapons work, why they survive, and what the people who carry them actually needed, subscribe. This is what we do.